Welcome back to lecture 3. So we have introduced a network. We have introduced the basic components, Ohm's law, by which the different components are driven. So the relationship between voltages and currents in a particular component. So we have introduced only the three, like resistance, capacitance and inductance. But for the time being it's fine, because our objective is a little different as of now. The remaining components we will discuss in the appropriate time. For example, I have given the fundamental chapter where transformer is discussed or dependent voltage sources are discussed. That will come later. Right now, today we will start discussing different signals first, like the functional representation of signals and how we can analyze in the appropriate way, how we can decompose the signal. So this mathematical understanding of signals are required. As we discussed in lecture 2, there are different differential and integral equations where if we take some arbitrary input signal, we cannot solve that problem. Even in the RC case, if you instead of having some DC input, if you take some sinusoid input, you see that you cannot solve that integral equation. You cannot integrate that particular functional form. So for that we have to understand signals first and how we can represent signals in the appropriate form. So which is essentially the frequency domain representation of signal. So let us start our journey. In last two lectures, we came across some voltages in the examples which were some ideal voltage models. For example, the DC, so which we can represent using some constant. So Vt is equal to V, which runs from say time minus infinity to infinity. Or we can represent using some semi-infinite constant voltage. So it becomes Vt is equal to V from t is equal to 0 to infinity and 0 before that. So we can write Vt is equal to 0 when t belongs to say minus infinity to 0 and V when t belongs to 0 to infinity. So like that, or even sinusoid. So we can represent Vt as a sinusoid. So Vt is equal to say, it can run from minus infinity also. So V sine omega t. Here this V is the amplitude and this omega is called the angular frequency, which can be written as omega is equal to 2 pi f, where f is the frequency and f is related to the time period of a sinusoid. That means this is a periodic signal, it repeats itself after every t unit of time, which is equal to 1 by f. So this is called the time period. So these kind of idealized signals we have seen. However, it is possible to have various different other kinds of signals as well, and which may not have some regular functional representation. So these functions are very much well-known functions. For example, if I draw something like this, it may be periodic. It can have a similar kind of repetition. So this profile can repeat again and again and again infinitely. Or it may not have any repetition, it can be absolutely arbitrary in the entire time frame. So if I ask you that how to represent these signals, frankly speaking, from our regular understanding of calculus, we cannot. There is no known functional form where we can write like as a function of time t such that the output will be like that. So we cannot write something like y is equal to ft, where t is running between say minus infinity to infinity or 0 to infinity, and y is the y-axis of this graph, and which will be a functional form, and this function I want to write as some known function from our calculus repository. That is not possible. So this lecture 3 we will start introducing something called signal analysis or signal decomposition, by which we can represent some typical signals in a suitable fashion. So that is our first instantiation towards so-called harmonic analysis or Fourier analysis. So this is the new thing we will start today, Fourier analysis. So to give a brief introduction about this guy Fourier, he was a Frenchman, and he was working on a problem of heat conduction. So heat equation was basically a diffusion equation where heat flows in a metallic plate or metallic disc, and finally it came across, like while solving those partial differential equations, it finally came out to be that if you cannot represent some arbitrary function over a finite domain as some infinite linear combination of some known functions, say the complex exponentials, you cannot solve the problem. So Fourier started investigating that problem, and he got some affirmative answer to that particular question, so which became the celebrated Fourier series. But we are not developing that theory of Fourier analysis from the historical perspective, since we have developed a rich geometrical understanding of the same problem, and we are right now equipped with the idea of vector space. So let us try to develop this Fourier analysis from a vector point of view, from a like we want to visualize function from a vector point of view. So that will give us some very strong intuition towards this Fourier or harmonic analysis in the broad generality. So you in calculus, from your school days or even from your first year mathematics, you are familiar with functions as maps, right? So how do you, from a set theory perspective, how do you define a map? So map means there is some domain, so domain of definition, and there is some codomain, or we can say range even, so where the function is defined. So this is a subset of the codomain, we can say, some curly C or something. Then a function is basically a map from the domain to the range, and this function can be of different forms, into function or one-to-one function, etc. We don't need those set theoretic behavior at this point of time, but what we need, we want to visualize functions not only as map but also as vectors. So let us go there and let us try to understand that concept first. So let us start with vector space. You are familiar with vector space. Okay, let us start with two-dimensional vector space, for example. So this is a two-dimensional vector space. So we know what is a vector. Vector is basically like any point in the space which we can think as some arrow starting from some origin. So this is the origin, and these are the two axes. So this we can think of some x-axis and y-axis, or we can talk about the unit vector in these directions to be I and j, or e1 and e2. I can name them e1 and e2. These are the unit vectors in these two directions. So what do you mean by unit vector? Unit vector means which are the direction is coinciding with one of the axes and the length of that particular vector is 1. Then the given vector, suppose v, this given vector, so this given vector is what? It is having some length and some direction, right? That is the definition of vector. So there is a unique way in a particular coordinate system with the unit vectors properly defined. There is one unique way by which you can represent this vector v, and that is called the orthogonal decomposition of the vector. So which will be basically, you have to project this vector on this axis, and then you have to find out the length of this projection. So suppose this length is v1, and similarly you project this vector on this direction and you get the projection to be v2. Then we can write this vector v as v1, which is a scalar, which is basically the length, into e1, this is a vector, plus v2 into e2. So the linear combination of these two vectors, e1 hat and e2 hat, those are the unit vectors. That linear combination is basically the representation of this vector. You are familiar with linear combination, right? If we formally define vector space is defined by the notation of of a few vectors. Suppose there are two vectors v1 and v2. So we say that the sum of two vectors will remain in that same vector space. v1 plus v2 will remain in the same vector space. If you multiply any vector with a scalar, that scalar can be any real number, or later on we will generalize that as some complex number. This scalar multiplication of the vector will also become a vector in that same vector space. We can we can combine this addition of vectors and scalar multiplication of vector together, and we can write that okay, alpha v1 plus beta v2, that will also become a vector which will remain in that vector space. Geometrically we can visualize this in this way. Suppose v1 is a vector, v2 is a vector. So suppose alpha is equal to 2 and beta is equal to 3. So what does that mean? Alpha is equal to 2 means alpha into v1 will be basically in the same direction, but the length will be double of original v1. So if v1 is having this length, it will have this length. Similarly, if v2 is having this length, 3v2 will be having 3 times length. So this will be 3v2. Then alpha v1 plus beta v2 will be basically, you have to apply the parallelogram law, and this will be the sum alpha v1 plus beta v2. So this is linear combination, and vector space is basically collection of all the vectors such that any linear combination of any number of vectors will remain in that space. So this is our two-dimensional vector space, or R2 we say. Now this unique decomposition of the vector using these two unit vectors in the two axis directions, this gives us a special power like of representation, which is basically the coordinate representation of the vector. So we can write v is equal to simply by a column of two real numbers. So we can write down this as just two real numbers, v1 and v2. Oh, okay. So like when I was talking about the vectors here I am basically mentioning the vectors. You understand from the context, right? And so for the vectors I am giving some arrow above it, and here also v, there is some arrow. For unit vector I am just giving a hat, and when I am just writing some v1 or something, this is basically a scalar. This is some real number, suppose. So this value can be 2, this value can be 4, something like that. So we can represent this vector v in a unique way when this e1 hat and e2 hat are fixed. Now what about this projection? So this projection can be defined only if you have the adequate geometry, which is implicit in this two-dimensional Euclidean space, R2 space. So what that geometry is? That geometry means you have to define the length of a vector. That has to be defined properly. So that is implicit because in this case you assume that u1 is basically a unit length vector, and second is the angle between two vectors, that is also required. Why? Because when you defined the axis, the coordinate axis, x-axis, y-axis, etc., the understanding, implicit understanding here also is that they are perpendicular to each other, they are orthogonal to each other. So the angle between the two axes is 90 degree. Given that circumstances, we can actually mean the projection. So what is the projection? Projection is orthogonal projection. So when you drop the line from the vector to the axis, it should make 90 degree over there. Then you know what is v1. What is v1? v1 is basically the length of the vector. If I write the length of the vector by this double vertical lines, so this is the vector, by this I am meaning the length into cosine of theta, when theta is basically the angle between the corresponding axis and the vector. So you know from school level geometry, right? The coordinate geometry was there. So v1, the length in that direction, so the projection of the vector v on that x-axis, that is v1, that v1 will be v, length of v, cosine theta. and if you take that to be theta, then V2 will be V sine theta. These are old stuff, but nevertheless it is better to repeat them. If I ask you the question, then how to compute the length of the V1, length of the vector V from these values V1 and V2, or from the coordinate representations of V1 and V2? We know Pythagoras theorem. So this is a right angle triangle. These are the two sides. This is the hypotenuse. So we can compute the length of this from these two as square root of this square plus this square. This square is same as this square, right? So the length of V, this will be equal to square root of V1 square plus V2 square. Pythagoras theorem. So by this we can compute the length of any vector. There is another name of the length which will be called later on norm. We'll mention that. Similarly, we can compute the angle of the vector with any axis, say x-axis, that is the normal standard representation. That theta can be computed in a similar way from V1 and V2 as, so tan theta sin theta by cos theta will be V2 by V1. So we can compute theta to be tan inverse of V2 by V1. We are like understanding that theta is between say 0 and 2 pi. So in that understanding, that if both are positive, that will be in the first quadrant. If V1 is negative, then we will be in this quadrant. If both are negative, then we will be in third quadrant. And if V2 is negative, V1 is positive, then we will be in this quadrant. So from that we understand what will be theta from the value of V1 and V2. So this is a two-dimensional vector space, and we can see a few geometries like this. Now this particular concept we are mentioning in the next page, that how do you do projection. So here you are doing projection on one of the axes, but you can do it on arbitrary vectors as well. So let us bring that geometry as well. So projection of a vector. Yeah, please bear with me, because right now I am working only on two-dimensional vector. We will quickly escalate towards n-dimensional vector and then infinite dimensional vector. But for the time being, let us see that what is happening in two-dimensional vector space. That will give you the strong intuition. So suppose you have two vectors, say u and v, okay, and I ask you about the geometry between u and v, and suppose the angle between u and v is say phi. So if I ask you that what will happen if I project u on v, so what will be this length? So on which it is dependent on? It is dependent on basically the length of u and this phi. Clearly, right? So this is the length of u, this will be u cosine phi. So the projection of u on v, these are the vectors, so I am giving the arrow now, will be equal to, so the length of that will be u, the length of u cosine phi, but the direction will be towards v. So the unit vectors towards v, what will be the unit vectors towards v? It will be v divided by the length of v. In this way we can write. So the projection will be u cosine phi into v, this is the direction, divided by the direction of v, right? Now so this particular concept, that how you are computing projection of one vector into another, so we like bring up the notion of inner product, which you have encountered again earlier. The name was called dot product between two vectors. So this inner product or dot product concept that came from basically mechanics, where there is some force in this direction and there is some displacement in this direction, so work done by that force in this direction, that work is a scalar quantity which will be basically the length of u into length of v into cosine theta, because this component of u in this direction is u cosine phi, that multiplied by the displacement in that direction, so that will be the work done. So in that sense, inner product is defined between u and v. It is written like this by this triangular bracket, and it is essentially the length of u or the norm of u into the length of v into cosine of phi. So this is coming from that concept of projection, and this will become really handy in understanding the geometry of any vector space whenever it is not mere 2 dimension, it can be bigger dimensional space. So from here, this has certain characteristics, we'll mention them briefly. So the characteristics is that so the length of a vector can be generated from this inner product. So suppose you compute the inner product between u with u. What will you get? You will get the length of u into length of u, and what is the angle between u and u? 0. So cosine of 0. And what is cosine of 0? 1. And what is this? This is u square, the length of u square. So you can see that you can compute the length of u from that inner product as square root of inner product of u and u. This particular characteristics is called the positive definite characteristics. Positive definiteness of inner product. And obviously this length is always positive, right? Length is always positive. It will be 0 only if the vector is 0. Otherwise it is always positive. Or non-negative, like it is called positive semi-definiteness or something. Since if for a vector 0 it is 0, otherwise it is always positive. So this inner product and the concept of norm, these two will become really handy when we handle higher dimensional space larger than 2. So these concepts till now we are talking about this familiar, right? Let us now quickly move towards higher dimensional spaces. So one takeaway from our 2-dimensional space is that any vector can be written as briefly let me talk about one thing more. So we know that any vector can be represented as a linear combination of its projection towards the coordinate axis. So if the coordinate axis is E1 and this is E2, these are the two unit vectors in these two directions, and if this is say V with angle theta, so how to compute what will be the projection of V on this? So we want the representation, right? This is V1 and this is V2. We want the representation of the vector as V1, V2. This is the vector and these are the real numbers, the scalars. So to get that, we need to first compute what is V1. So how do you get V1? V1 is basically the length of the vector when you project V on E1 hat. So basically we have to compute the inner product between this and this, then we will come to this point. So what is the inner product between V and E1? From the formula, it is basically the length of the vector V into length of vector E1. What is E1 length? Unity into cosine of theta. So that is essentially the length of V into cosine of theta. That is obviously our understanding of V1. We have shown in the earlier page that that V1 is essentially length of V into cosine theta. So V1 is nothing but the inner product between V and E1. Similarly, the inner product between V and E2. Let us see. the inner product between V and E2 is this direction, so you have to take the cosine theta of this angle, what is that angle? That is pi by 2 minus theta, right? This total angle is 90 degree, pi by 2. So this will be length of V into length of E2 into cosine of pi by 2 minus theta. What is that? That is V, length of E2 is 1, and what is cosine pi by 2 minus theta? That is sine of theta. So you see, earlier we have already shown that V2 is equal to length of V into sine theta. So you can see that this is your V2. So clearly you can see the unique representation of the vector, which is V, which is written as a column of two real numbers V1 and V2, and those numbers V1 and V2, they are nothing but the inner product of the vector with the unit directions in those two directions. Then our original representation of the vector, when we wrote that V is equal to V1 E1 plus V2 E2, this has a new formulation. We can write that in a new way. Let me show you. Let me take a new paper. So this is the two directions. The unit vector in this direction is E1, the unit vector in this direction is E2, and the vector is say V. The angle is say theta. So when we say that the projection is this, so V1 and this projection is V2, the two scalars, and we just wrote down that V1 is nothing but the inner product of V with E1, and V2 is the inner product of V with E2. Then we can write V as V1 E1 plus V2 E2, which can be written as V inner product with E1 plus V inner product of E2. So you see that this is the way the vector is written in terms of the unit vectors chosen. This can be arbitrary because E1 and E2, nobody is saying that it has to be this direction, but the vector is fixed. In the geometric plane, when I say a vector is this vector is fixed. What I can do, I can rotate the coordinate axis. That is not fixed. So this was one way of representation. I can change the representation direction. So I can make E1 in this direction and E2 in this direction. Only condition is that E1 and E2 has to be orthogonal to each other. That has to be 90 degree, and their lengths have to be 1. So they need to be orthonormal to each other. That means they are having unit norm, and they should be orthogonal to each other. Only you can represent V with respect to those two unit directions, those two unit vectors, by this equation, and this representation will not be unique anymore because they are unique with respect to the chosen orthonormal unit vectors. If the orthonormal unit vectors are fixed, this representation is fixed. Otherwise, you have to compute this in that new direction with respect to the newer orthonormal vectors, and you have to compute this. So these orthonormal basis vectors, these orthonormal vectors means orthogonal vectors with unit norms, orthogonal to each other, right? Orthogonal to each other. That is understood. With unit norm. These have a good name, which is called the basis. So we commonly say like the base, etc. So this name is called basis, and with respect to basis, you can write any vector like this. So this is a good starting point. So let us increase the dimensionality of the vector space. So the process of representing a vector using its basis is called the orthogonal decomposition or orthogonal expansion. So we can use the same concept in a bigger vector space. Suppose we talk about the vector space Rn, that is n-dimensional vector space. So of course we cannot draw that vector space on paper, because on paper we can only draw up to 2-dimensional vector space, 1-dimensional and 2-dimensional. In 3D space we can make 3 basis vectors like this and this. That will make you like one direction is coming out of the paper, and that will make a 3-dimensional vector space. And over there, you know, the 3D geometry stuff where you can make the vectors and how you can add and all. Now, keeping that picture in mind, let us mathematically move towards a n-dimensional vector space. So what are needed for that n-dimensional vector space to develop, the conception to be developed? We need the basis vectors. So we have to understand, I'm just drawing for the sake of drawing, this is not true representation, but suppose this is some n-dimensional vector space and these are the directions which in that n-dimension, they are the basis vectors. So between all these vectors, the angle is pi by 2 or 90 degree, they are orthogonal, and the unit vectors are having, length 1, the norm is 1. So that is a legitimate vector basis in that vector space. Let us name them, say E1, E2, E3. Now I am removing that hat notation because this will be coming quite often. Whenever I am writing E, that is understood to be the basis. These are unit vectors orthogonal to each other. Okay, if two vectors are orthogonal, then what will be the inner product between them? Suppose U and V are orthogonal to each other. So we can write like this, right? Two vectors are orthogonal to each other. So we know from the definition of inner product, U inner product V will be length of U or the norm of U into length of V into cosine of theta, which is the angle between these two vectors. So not orthogonal or perpendicular means these two vectors are at 90 degree to each other. So this is a 90 degree angle or pi by 2 angle. Then cosine of 90 degree or pi by 2 is 0. So the inner product between these two vectors is 0. That is understood. So all these like orthonormal basis, so they all satisfy one condition, that is EI, EJ. If you take the inner product between these two, it will become delta IJ. I am developing one notation. This is called the Kronecker delta. This Kronecker delta takes two values. It will be 1 if I is equal to j. It will become 0 otherwise if I is not equal to j. You see that orthonormal basis vectors, they follow this thing. The inner product between EI and EJ, that will be 1 if I is equal to j. That means inner product between EI and EI, which is essentially the norm square of EI, right? Inner product between EI and EI, that is the length of EI square, which is 1. And if I is not equal to j, then they are orthogonal to each other. So their inner product becomes 0. So this Kronecker delta will come back again in network theory signal systems everywhere. So this is just the introduction of that in a different context, of course. So if we have these basis vectors, n basis vectors, then using these basis vectors, any vector in that n-dimensional vector space can be represented uniquely. So if take any vector v in that vector space Rn, we can write that then v is equal to, we have already developed it for 2 dimension. The development, the formula we obtained was, let me show you, was this. You take the vector, compute the inner product on the basis vector, multiply with the basis vector and add on. So we can, using that same notation, we can write that as summation of inner product of v, this is the vector, with say EI. So this is essentially the projection, the length of V when you do the projection on EI. So this inner product gives that length, like V into length of V into cos of theta if theta is the angle, into EI for I is equal to 1 to n. You see such a compact representation of the vector, and this you can write as a column vector, where the column vector will be written as V E1, V E2, V En. So that will be our column vector representation, and this is the so-called expansion. This is called the basis expansion of a vector. Now the concept, this expansion is, or this representation, which we can denote as V1, V2, etc. Those scalars, which are essentially those inner products of the vector V with the corresponding basis. These representations are very handy, and those who have done some linear algebra course, they are familiar with this vector space Rn and this representation, because when I write the vector as this representation, even if we do not mention the orthonormal basis function, orthonormal basis vector, still we can do several things like addition of two vectors, some scalar multiplication of vectors, and even computing inner product and norm of vectors using just these coefficients or coordinates. These are the coordinates, right? In a 2 dimension we have shown you that is the coordinate. So this this point in the 2 dimension space is basically the point V1, V2. V1 in the x-axis direction, V2 in the y-axis direction, right? So that is the V1, V2 representation is basically a coordinate representation, which we are doing it here for n dimension. So we can do usual vector space analysis using this representation, and that is what is so exciting about this representation. Let us show that. So this is the page number 5. Let's go to page number 6. So suppose you have two vectors in the vector space Rn. We are working with Rn, okay? So you have two vectors U and V. The basis vector is implicit, that is E1, E2, E3, En. So in that implicit basis vector system, we write the vector U is equal to this column, which is U1, U2, Un, and this vector V is equal to V1, V2, Vn. So in this implicit notation, which is actually meaning which actually means this, V1 is equal to V E1, inner product of V with E1, U1 will be inner product of U with E1, and the vector V is essentially this formula. This is the representation, this is the basis expansion. Similarly, you can do it for U as well. U is equal to summation I is equal to 1 to n, inner product of U with E1, Ei. So this is the representation of U, and these numbers, these n real numbers are written in a column fashion like this. So with this, we can do usual vector space operations. Suppose I want to add these two vectors, U plus V. So that will be another vector. We don't have to go to the vector space for the geometry. From this algebraic notation or the coordinate notation, we can straight away write down what will be the sum of the vector. So sum will be U1 plus U2, U1 plus V1, U2 plus V2. So it is like coordinate wise addition, right? And Un plus Vn. This is great because we took everything from geometry to the domain of algebra. That is basically Descartes' famous work. This is Cartesian geometry. We can do scalar multiplication of a vector in a similar way. Suppose you take a scalar alpha, some real number, you multiply with the vector. You can do this by putting alpha, multiplying alpha with every real number in the representation. So u2 up to alpha un. So this works perfectly well. So you can see how the linear combination will be some alpha u1 plus beta u v, alpha u plus beta v. So this will be equal to alpha u1 plus beta v1, alpha u2 plus beta v2, dot dot dot, alpha un plus beta vn. This will be the linear combination. If I ask you that what will be the length of say v or u, the norm, if I want to compute the norm, again Pythagoras theorem but in n dimension, and that still works, right? So even if you go from 2 to 3 dimension, it works. You can go to n dimension, it will similarly work. So the length of the vector v will be equal to square root of, so I can write like this and then we can take the square root. So it will be the length of v1, so basically vi square, I is equal to 1 to n, and take the square root. That's the length. So since this is from Euclidean geometry, it is called also Euclidean norm. Later on we will give another name. So this is Euclidean norm. And in a similar way, from these values, these coordinates, we can compute the inner product as well. Suppose we want to compute the inner product between u and v. You see, again we are just taking the geometry and that will work. So this will be ui into vi, I is equal to 1 to n. That's it. Such a beautiful formula. And you can check that whether this is corroborating with this, because the inner product of u and u is basically the norm of u square, or inner product of v and v is basically norm of v square. So if you take this formula when u becomes v, it will reduce to this, right? So in that coordinate representation we can do lots of stuff. So from this inner product you can compute immediately the angle between these two vectors u and v. Even if like visually to think of these two vectors in n-dimensional space and to compute the angle, it is not so simple. Even in 3-dimensional you can see that computing two angles between two vectors is not always very easy. So from here you can compute that, because we know that the inner product is basically length of u into length of v into cosine of theta. So from there we can compute the cosine of the angle between u and v. If I write it to be theta, it is basically the inner product between u and v divided by the length of u and length of v multiplied by length of v. And these things you can compute from the representation, from the coordinate representation or basis expansion representation. So if you know that representation, you can immediately compute it. So theta can be computed as cosine inverse bracket, this is summation ui vi, I is equal to 1 to n, divided by summation ui square, I is equal to 1 to n, square root of that, into summation vi square, I is equal to 1 to n, square root of that. So this formula will give you immediately the angle between those two vectors. So we get to understand that in n-dimensional vector space you can represent a vector using those basis vectors, and from there you can get the geometry. Geometry means basically the length of the vector, which is norm, and the inner product of the vector, which basically gives the angle between any two vectors. So that works fantastically in n-dimensional vector space. Now let us do some thought experiment that let us increase that size of that vector space from n to infinity. So basically what we want to do, we want to take the limit n tends to infinity. So where this kind of vector space is coming, I'm telling you. When I talk about a finite dimensional vector space, say n dimensional vector space, how I am writing it? I am representing using a column, and where I am writing some numbers, say v1, v2 to vn. So how many numbers? N numbers. N can be 10, n can be 100, n can be 1000, n can be even billion. Still this is a finite dimensional vector space. As long as n is finite. And in finite dimensional vector space, the good thing is that as long as all these values are finite, the sum like vi square, and if you take the sum from I is equal to 1 to n, this remains finite. So length of the vector is always finite. You cannot have a infinite length vector in a finite vector space as long as the coordinate representations are finite. If all of v1 to vn are less than infinity, this will always work. This will always exist. So our earlier definition of inner product and norm, they are all well defined as long as this n is less than infinity. So if you want to increase n, so if you want to try to increase n, what will it become? This vector will go on forever. So this will become like a sequence. So any sequence, suppose you think of the harmonic sequence, right? So 1, 1 by 2, 1 by 3, 1 by 4, and dot dot dot, 1 by some n, 1 by some n plus 1 for some n, and it will go on forever. So the last entry over there will be 1 by some infinitely large number which is close to 0. So the final this sequence is finally going to 0, of course, but this is some infinite sequence. You know about sequence, right? You have done series and sequence in class 12 when you talk about the summability of a sequence and all. So this sequence looks like a infinite dimensional vector, isn't it? This is a legitimate representation of an infinite dimensional vector. Any representation of any number of infinite number of real numbers, that is a legitimate representation of an infinite dimensional vector. So how will be a infinite dimensional vector space? What will be the geometry? Will there be infinite orthonormal basis vectors? I don't know, but let us suppose that there is some. There is some system of infinite dimensional basis vectors like e1, e2, e3, and it goes on forever, en plus 1. It goes on to infinity. There is some e infinity or something like that. And they are orthonormal. So that means here also the inner product between ei and ej, that is your delta ij, the Kronecker delta. So that is equal to 1 if I is equal to j, that is equal to 0 if I is not equal to j. Now if that exists, suppose this is there and there is some vector v in this infinite dimensional vector space. So can we compute the coordinate representations? Of course, we can compute the inner product of v with all of them. Let us do that. So your v1 will be v and u1, your v2 will be v and e2, and so on and so forth. Your vn will be v and en, the inner product, and it goes on forever up to infinity. So that representation, which is like a sequence, that vectorial representation v1, v2, that will be a contender of the coordinate system for that infinite dimensional vector. Now, what is the length of the vector? Euclidean, like if this is, since this is Euclidean space, you should apply Pythagoras theorem. So the length of the vector is the square root of, or the length of the vector square is sum of vi square I is equal to 1 to not n but infinity. This you can write as limit n tends to infinity summation I is equal to 1 to infinity 1 to n vi square. You can see that some other concept which was not there in vector space theory earlier, the concept of limit, that is coming in. So we are entering the realm of some new calculus. This was not there in vector space theory. So where the length of the vector is obtained by some limiting process. So which vectors will have some finite length? The vectors for which this sum converges. This sum converges. So basically you will get a sequence of summation vi square I is equal to 1 to n for different n. As n tends to infinity, it has to converge. If it converges, then only you will get a vector which is a legitimate vector in that infinite dimensional space. Similarly, for inner product, you can get another infinite dimensional vector with a corresponding representation as u1, u2 to infinity. You can compute the inner product between u and v, and you will come across to another infinite sum as ui vi I is equal to 1 to infinity. Now this has the meaning that it has to be limit n tends to infinity summation ui vi I is equal to 1 to n. If this limit exists, then only these two are legitimate representation in that infinite dimensional vector space. If they don't exist, if there is no limiting value, if this sum goes to infinity as n tends to infinity, then they are not member of any legitimate infinite dimensional vector space. The particular infinite dimensional vector space for which, of course, we understand that all these coordinates are finite. They are all finite. These inner products are all finite. Now, if these sums are having some limiting value, these sums are having some limiting value, this sum suppose for this vector, then the length is finite, then only this is a legitimate member of that infinite dimensional vector space. So we give a good name of such vector space where these limits are finite. It is called Hilbert space by the name of the famous German mathematician David Hilbert. So we stop here today. Hello, so today was a good domain which I started. So starting from your very basic fundamental background on vector space theory and coordinate geometry, and from there it quickly escalated towards infinite dimensional vector space, which is not at all obvious. It is a bizarre concept and it was developed in 20th century. So David Hilbert, who pioneered the work, and you know, like, where did he work? He was a professor in that famous Göttingen University where this relativity and quantum mechanics happened. So those giants of physics, Albert Einstein and Heisenberg and Max Born, they were there. So David Hilbert was like gigantic figure in 20th century mathematics in Europe. He was famous for those coinage of those millennium problems, right? So this Hilbert space theory I am introducing in a very naive way, of course, without the proper rigor which is required, but at least you can understand the difficulty of ensuring an infinite dimensional vector space or Hilbert space which we can use for intuitive development of Fourier series. So wait for that series which we will introduce in next class. So till then, goodbye.